welcome back to another sewing tutorial. Today I'm going to teach you how to make the scarf top. I designed the scarf top when I was living in Australia last year, and then when I went back to Europe I launched it for my slow fashion brand. And I really got so many orders from it. People from all over the world were ordering it. I got so much amazing feedback from it. And then it also got featured at the Refinery 29 monthly shopping list, which was such an honor. And I'm so excited now to teach you how to make your own scarf top, because this is really beginner friendly, but also if you're more advanced at sewing, I think you should really make yourself a scarf top, just because it's really such a beautiful piece of clothing and such an eye catcher. And I'm going to be using my overlock machine for most of it today, but you can 100% use your normal sewing machine. And every time when you start a new sewing project, I would always recommend just taking a bit of the fabric that you want to work with and just play around with your sewing machine for a bit until you find the right tension, the right setting. I don't know, maybe it's best, depending on which fabric you're buying. Maybe it's best if you use a zigzag stitch with your normal sewing machine. Maybe you can use a straight stitch, but just make the stitch length a bit longer. Just play around with it for a few minutes. And I'm also going to be teaching you what you have to do from beginning on. So I'm going to link the sewing pattern in the description, and then you need to print out the sewing pattern. And it's really important that when you print it out that you set the scale to 100%, because otherwise the sewing pattern won't be working 100%ly. Like, it really needs to be set to 100%. And the first thing you need to do is you print out the first page, and on the first page you will find two square boxes, and one of the boxes needs to measure 5 centimeters and 5 centimeters, and the box next to it is 2 inches and 2 inches. So print the first page, check those measurements, and then if the measurements are correct you can continue and print out the remaining pages. For today's scarf top you will need jersey fabric. When I made it for my slow fashion brand, I was using bamboo jersey, which was the softest fabric. I absolutely love it. So if you can get your hands on bamboo jersey, I would highly recommend getting some. But I couldn't find some, but I just got some cotton jersey at my local fabric store, which is stretchy in 4 ways. And my color is like this cream white, which I think is also going to be nice, especially now that it's spring here in Australia. And you also need fabric scissors, a measuring tape, needles, matching sewing thread, and that's basically it. So here again, let's have a look together at the first page. Here are the 2 boxes I was talking about. You just actually need to measure one of them, but I decided to put 2, one in centimeters and one in inches on here, just in case your measuring tape is only in centimeters or only in inches. And here we have the size key. I printed mine out now in color, but you can also just print it out in black and white, because all lines are different. So even when it's in black and white, you will be able to tell all the sizes apart. And then one important thing, or actually 2, on each page you'll find a number and letter. And here we have A1, A2, A3, and then it switches to B1, B2, and so on. And what we want to do is we want to put the first page A1 right here, and then in the corner you find another number and letter AA22, and you have the same down here. So after A1 we put all the A's in the first column, then all the B's in the second, C's, D's, and so on. So it goes A1, A2, A3, and so on, B1, B2, B3, and so on, C1, C2, C3. And after A1 comes A2, and what we want to do, again, we're making sure that the numbers and letters in the little circle match. And then we put the new page on top of the old page, and we just want to put it just right there where the dotted line is. We don't want to be able to see the dotted line anymore. And then we take the next page, A3, and again, numbers and letters in the corner are matching. And then we want to put it right here where the dotted line is. And also this dotted line here on the side needs to be lining up. We switch to B. So now again you can check the numbers and letters. So AB22, AB22, and we put it on top, and we just want to put it right where the dotted line is. So just like this. And this dotted line down here is in line with this one down here. And then after B1 comes B2. And again, we put it on top, just covering up the dotted line here. And then those lines here on the side also need to be matching, like in line. And then after B2 comes B3. And we do the same again. Right now at the beginning I would recommend just putting it everywhere roughly, just so we know which page needs to go where. And then when we go back to glue it together, we can really make sure that everything is in the perfect spot. Once you have laid down all the pieces of paper in front of you, it should look something like this. So we have A1 to A3, B1 to B7, C1 to C7 and D1 to D7. And now I've just laid it together pretty roughly, and now I'm gonna go in and go again page by page, make sure it's lining up perfectly, and I'm gonna use some sticky tape and stick the pages together. Now that we have glued everything together, we have to take our bust and our waist measurements, and then we go to the size chart, find our right size. And I'm a size small, and after you found your size, you go back to the first page, and a size small is the blue weirdly dotted line, which is this one right here. So now I'm going to take my scissors and cut out my size. Okay, so we have this pattern piece now, which is for the back of the top, and then we have this long one, which is the front. And I just noticed while I was cutting out mine that I made a mistake here, and on mine it says cut out once, but you actually have to cut it out twice. But I'm gonna fix that for your final sewing pattern, so there won't be any confusion. So the front needs to be cut out twice and the back needs to be cut out twice. And I'm going to show you what's the easiest way to do it. So now we need to put the fabric in front of us on the table. If your table is not big enough, just do it on the floor. And if you bought your fabric from a fabric store where it was on a small roll, your fabric probably is already folded in half, but if it was on a big roll, maybe it's not. But what I'm trying to tell you is that you need to fold your fabric in half. So here it's open and here it's folded on the side, and we're just doing this because we need 2 times the front and 2 times the back, but now we just need to cut it out once, but at the end we have it twice. And we're just going to start now with the front of the pattern, and we just put it in front of us on the fabric, lay it nice flatly, make sure the fabric is nice and straight, and now we're gonna pin the pattern piece to the fabric. Or if you want to, you can also use chalk and trace it on there and then cut it out. But because I'm using white fabric and I only have white chalk, I'm just gonna pin it, which I prefer anyways. After we've pinned the front to the fabric, we're gonna do the same to the back. And then once we've pinned both to the fabric, we can start cutting it out. I've taken out now the pins back here. And then what I would recommend you to do is to put a pin right here where the top of the back is, just so we remember later on where the top is and where the bottom is. I thought maybe it's easier if I can show you on 2 miniature versions of what we have just cut out, what we need to sew next. And we're gonna start with the back of the top, and where we had just put a needle to remember where the top is, we're just gonna sew it closed along here. Just either with your overlock or with your normal sewing machine. Here we have the 2 back parts, and we always want the good sides facing each other, so the bad sides are facing out. And here's the top of the back, and we're just gonna sew along here. And now we come to the front of the top, and what we have to do is we're gonna sew from here all the way up the scarf, and we're doing the same on the other side. We start here and go all the way up, and then we're gonna sew this part close. And you need to make sure that the good sides are facing each other again, and then I would recommend maybe using some pins and just pinning everything in place. Sometimes I tend to, when I've sewn something many times, that I don't pin it anymore, just because I feel confident enough not having to do that. But if you're a beginner and if it's your first time sewing it, I would really recommend putting some pins in it, just so it's not moving around too much. And then also on the other side, and just all the way to the top. And now it doesn't matter if you start over here or on this side. I'm just gonna start here where the armpit is and just gonna sew all the way to the end of the scarf. Now this side is done, so we're gonna do the other side now. We're gonna start here again where the armpit is. And I always lift the foot up a bit, and then I'm gonna start sewing. And now here's the end of the scarf, and what we do now is we're just gonna sew this part closed. And what we can do now is, just so we don't just leave this hanging here and risk that it might open up again, we're just gonna take a needle that's not very sharp and has a big opening, and I'm gonna push it through here, just a couple centimeters, and then I'm gonna pull the thread through here, pull it, and now the excess thread we can just cut off. And now it's not looking like this. Now we need to flip it the other way around. So we're just gonna take our arm and put it in the scarf, and then I'm just gonna grab my corners here with my thumb and my middle finger, push them together, and then pull it out. And what I'm doing now is I'm just gonna make sure that the corners are nice and sharp. I guess you would say sharp, I don't know. Just so it's looking nice, just so they're not stuck inside the scarf. But how can I show this? They're like this. So now the front is starting to look like the front, which is amazing. And next up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna sew the front and the back together. The way we're gonna sew the front and the back now together is gonna look super nice, because at the end we won't be able to see any of the seams. And it's a bit hard for me putting it into words, so I'm just gonna flip the camera around again and show you what we need to do next. When we look at this here again, at this miniature version, we can see that this curve is longer and this one is much shorter. So we need to find this part of the front of the top now. And the easiest way to do it is if you put the front of the top in front of you, and then you can see it like this curve is longer and this one is shorter. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over here and open it up again and lay it nicely flat in front of us. So we've just folded the two front pieces, like the two front pieces that were sewn together, we just folded it up again like a butterfly. And now we're taking the back of the top. And what we want to do, we want the good sides facing each other. So here we consider this the good side, and this, where we can see the seam, is the bad side. And the same goes for the back. So this is considered the bad side, and we want the good side and the good side facing each other. And here where the seam is, we're just gonna match it up. We're gonna take a needle and we're gonna pin it in place. And we're gonna do the same over here at the end of the top. We're also gonna use a needle, stick it in here, and then we can stick a few more needles along here. Just maybe 2 more. And we do the same over here. There we go. And again from a bit more far away, just to show you again. So we're gonna start here, along here where we pinned the two seams together. Now that we've sewn this side together, we lay it in front of us again, just the way it was before. And we match the seams up here again, stick a needle inside, and we're gonna pin all along it again. But before we start sewing, there's one important thing that we need to keep in mind, because we're not gonna sew close all of it. We need to keep a little hole this time, because at the end, when we're gonna hem it, we're also gonna hem it in a way that you won't be able to see any seams. And through the hole that we're gonna leave now, we will be able to pull the dress out again at the end. Now that we have pinned all along here, we're gonna start sewing here, but we're only gonna sew the first around 12 centimeters. And here where I put an orange pin, we stop sewing. We leave a gap of around 5 to 7 centimeters. And then we start sewing here again, all the way to the end. And later on, I'll show you and explain to you why we left this gap. But it's very important that you leave a gap here. So we start sewing. And now that we get close to the needle, I'm gonna pull the needle out and I'm gonna sew so it's gonna look like this. There's gonna be a bit of a curve here, but that doesn't really matter. And now I'm gonna pull this needle out, but I'm gonna keep an eye on where the needle was. And I'm gonna put the foot, lift the foot up a bit, and I'm just gonna leave this gap open here and just gonna continue sewing. So this is what it looks like now. Here there's a little hole in it, and what we're gonna do now, we're gonna take the big needle again and just hide the leftover thread in here, just so it looks nice and it won't open up again. we are almost finished now. What we're going to do now is just we're going to hold on to the scarf here and pull the top down. And now the scarf top is starting to look like the scarf top, which is very good. I would recommend to you that you go ahead and try it on to see if you need to make any adjustments, if you want to make any changes. And if you're happy, then the next step is going to be to hem the top. I'm going to show you two ways. The first option is a bit more easy to understand. So if you're a beginner, maybe you want to do the first option that I'm going to show you, or the second option is what I'm always doing, and in my opinion it looks much nicer because you won't be able to see a seam. It may seem a bit complicated now when I'm going to explain it, but maybe just watch it once and then go back again and watch it again. It's really not hard. It's just like once you wrap your head around it, it makes click and you'll be able to understand it, and it's super easy. But yeah, I'm going to show you both ways and then you can decide which option you want to go for. Option one is that we're gonna flip it inside out. The inside, I don't know why I just did that because it's actually the inside. And then we just line up those two seams and we're just gonna fold it in. Maybe fold it in 1 centimeter and then 1 centimeter again. Take some needles and then pin around it. But here once again, like, you can fold it up as much or as little as you want to, depending how long or short you want the dress to be. And also if you go for option number one, the top is going to be a little bit shorter than what I usually make it. So here you can cut the thread off a little bit, just so it looks a bit cleaner and not so chaotic. So we're just gonna go around and pin it. We have pinned all around it. You can go to your sewing machine and just sew quite close to the edge and hem the top. The reason why I don't prefer this option is because there's so many layers of fabric now and it's looking quite fat. But yeah, it's up to you. If you want to go ahead and do that, go ahead. But I'm going to show you now option two, which is the option I always do when I'm sewing the scarf top. So I'm just going to go ahead and take all the pins out. Now I'm going to show you the way how I prefer finishing the scarf top. And we're going to lay the top in front of us. Here is the little hole that we left earlier. And here, those two seams are lining up here. And right now, the bad sides are facing each other and the good sides are out. But what we want now is we want the good sides to face each other. So we take those two, pull it apart, and then to meet again. And I'm going to put a pin here now so you can see the good sides are facing each other. We're going to line the seams up and I'm going to put a needle in here. And what we want to do now is, I wouldn't recommend pinning it, but you can take the scarf now and just lay it in between. So there's like this little sack of fabric now. And I know it looks a bit confusing. And it will continue to look confusing until we've sewn it, but trust me, it's gonna look so nice. We're gonna start sewing it now, and the thing is we can't pin it because while we sew we need to pull the fabric out again, because right now like it's a circle that we're sewing and we just can't pin it right now. But we're just gonna start here, and while you sew it will make sense. And now we're just gonna start sewing a few centimeters before where we had put the needle and before the seam. And we're just gonna follow this until we end up again where we started. And I would recommend just sewing slow because you will need to continue pulling out more fabric as you go. And here we come to the two other seams, and again the good sides are facing each other. You line them up and just continue sewing. And once you've reached the other two seams, you know that you're halfway there. And we pull again the fabric out, just wiggle it around a bit. And here you can already see that we're reaching almost the point where we started. And once we get there, we're just gonna sew over it a few centimeters, just to make sure everything is properly closed. And we cut it off. And now with this, we're just gonna do what we've done earlier too. We're gonna take the needle and just pull it through here. Gonna push the needle through the seam in the little hole here, pull it through, and then we can cut. What we need to do now is we need to find the little hole that we left, the gap, and maybe it will take you a short minute to find the hole, but once you found the hole, you're gonna stick your fingers in here and you're gonna feel for the scarf, or you're just basically gonna feel for anything that's inside there. And then you need to start pulling it out. There we go. Now everything is the way it should be again. The last thing we need to do now is we need to close the little hole we left open here. So we're gonna go over to our normal sewing machine and we're gonna close it, and then we're finished. I would recommend now using thread that's matching your fabric, but I'm gonna be using different color thread just so you can see where I'm sewing, because it will be the only stitching that you will be able to see, but on the other hand you won't be able to see it because it will be in the inside. But I don't know, I always recommend using sewing thread that's matching. And what I'm doing now is I'm going to take 2 pins and just stick them in where I stopped sewing earlier with my overlock machine, just so I know. So can you, yeah, you should be able to see it. Like here is the hole, and then here where the pins are, it's already sewn together. So I'm just going to start 1 centimeter before the needle, and I'm going to finish 1 centimeter after the needle. My sewing machine is set to a straight stitch and the length is at around 3. What's really important now is when we sew, we want to make sure that the fabric is folded inwards, just 0.5 centimeter. So we want it to look like this. And now I'm gonna slowly start sewing, and just make sure you're not too close to the edge. We are now finished sewing our scarf top. The only thing you need to do now is to flip it inside out, because the part that we're just sewing needs to be on the inside. And I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you have any questions, if any steps I was doing too fast or something is unclear, just please let me know. I am really always so grateful to get any kind of feedback. And I also want to say a huge thank you to everyone who bought the sewing pattern for the Leah dress and who watched the video and who gave me feedback on it. It means so much to me. And I promise you there's going to be so many more sewing tutorials coming. The next video I want to make is going to be a beginner's guide to when you want to start, how to sew, how to set up your sewing machine, and just the very basics. And then I'm also going to make a video where you don't need to purchase a sewing pattern, where we're just going to make a super simple open back top that I've been wearing so much in the summer, that I want to teach you how to make, and it's going to be super beginner friendly again, even easier than this one. But yeah, there's going to be so many more sewing tutorials coming. Under the reel that I posted of the Leah dress on Instagram, a lot of people were saying that they don't like open back pieces, but I personally love it so much, and so many of my designs have an open back, but I also promise you that there's going to be a lot of pieces coming with a closed back and pants and skirts, so I really want to create sewing tutorials for everyone. And yeah, just thank you again, and if you have any questions, please leave a comment or send me a message on Instagram. Bye!